الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي ملك الملكوت بقدرته وساد العظماء بجوده الذي لا يخشى إلا عدله ولا يرجى إلا فضله، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء خاتم النبيين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are slowly but surely getting to the end of the month. There are, I believe, 2 or 3 more nights left. According to moonsighting.com and various reports from around the world, there is no possibility of sighting the moon on Monday night, but there is a huge possibility or probability of sighting the moon on Tuesday night. The green zone that shows on the map literally covers almost all of the world, apart from some minor areas. So most probably Wednesday is going to be the beginning of the month. It's very painful for those who have been looking, as I explained before, to the month of Ramadan for purification and tazkiyah, to see so quickly time passes by and we only have 2 or 3 nights left. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that within the short time left, we will be able to do something and salvage something from the month of Ramadan as far as tawbah, tazkiyah, purification of soul, etc. Inshallah. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. مثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم في سبيل الله كمثل حبة أنبتت 7 سنابل في كل سنبلة 100 حبة والله يضاعف لمن يشاء والله and command people to be charitable in their life. But I will come back to this verse in a minute. Let us recap some of the things that we have said in the past nights. The last 2 nights. Last night specifically, I focused on the concept, one of the most main obstacles to spiritual development, and that was hubbud dunya. And the night before, we talked about khawf and raja as 2 characteristics of the muttaqeen, and how to balance the fear of the consequence of our deed. We don't have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If there is fear, it's fear that our deeds are not up to scratch. And at the same time, we are hopeful of Allah's mercy. I said that the balance between these 2 is when fear does not become debilitating and somehow become disproportionate in a way that we become despondent and we simply give up hope and that's it. I cannot do anything. Since I am sinful, I might as well forget about it. And at the same time, hope would not reach a level we become very comfortable with committing sins and constantly appealing to Allah's mercy. Inna Allah ghafurun rahim. Last night also talked about the concept of hubbud dunya, the love of material world. And I posed the question that it's very relevant. If dunya, according to verses and other hadith is so despicable and detested, how comes that we have other ahadith and other sayings from Ahlul Bayt and others that clearly talks as a positive, dunya being as a positive factor in our life, a way to achieve hereafter? So which one should we believe? The issue of dunya is similar to human beings ourselves. We have a verse in the Holy Quran that on the one hand says that we, ahsanul khaliqeen, human being, could reach the best of the creation, and at the same time could drop to asfal as-safilin, depending on what we do. Dunya becomes positive or negative, or dismissed or needed, or looked after, depending on the approach that we have to dunya. If the key factor is this idea, if we look at dunya as the goal and the objective of our life, we do nothing else, we struggle day in, day out, chasing the American dreams. That's all. Really doesn't matter to us whether there is akhirah, ethics, morality, and everything else. Normally, what happens as a consequence of this economic system, most people tend, no matter what faith they follow, drift into this kind of behavior. And there are others that, no, they see dunya, they use dunya, but they use it primarily as a mean to secure the hereafter, not as a goal in itself, but to use it as a way to secure the hereafter. Then the difference between the positive and the negative is our approach to dunya. So according to the hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen, those people who look at dunya as the objective, look at dunya, then they are the one that hubb dunya for them becomes problematic when it comes to spiritual development. And those who look through dunya, the aim is somewhere else, but you use dunya as a mean for achieving that end, then they are the one that would benefit from this dunya, as I said last night. And if we look at verses in the Holy Quran, we see the same kind of things. On the one hand, there is a verse that says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted to the believers and mu'mineen to benefit from hayat dunya. قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَ لِعِبَادِهِ. Who said that you cannot benefit from the blessing of life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for you? Zina here, and there is another verse that uses the same word, zina, but in a negative sense. إِنَّمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا لَعِبٌ وَلَهْوٌ وَزِينَةٌ وَتَفَاخُرٌ. So the negative sense and the positive sense depends on our approach, whether we are going to spend our life purely for the sake of the hereafter, and we use dunya as a mean of achieving it, or no, we forget about everything else and we only think and work for the sake of dunya. The concept of dunya leads me to something else that probably relevant as we go up and we gradually get to the end of the month. And during the month of Ramadan, Muslims are called to a higher state of spirituality, and that's without question. From the beginning of the month, we have been talking about nothing else but this kind of higher level of spirituality. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam. The verse that I started with, the beginning, I can't believe it, it's only a month ago. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam. What for? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Purification, tazkiyah, and so on is needed, part and parcel of the month. And also we have been called to compassion and mercy as well. Unfortunately, when it comes to interpreting the fasting in the holy month, we tend to interpret the higher state of morality and spirituality to mean only abstinence from food and drink and occasional prayers during this month. Without understanding, we forget that there is another component to the fasting, that they have to go hand in hand. And that is the spiritual struggle cannot be achieved unless we act generously towards the less fortunate and the charities. If we go back to Khutbah Sha'baniyah, the Holy Prophet ﷺ weaves through. The first section talks about the concept of importance of the month of Ramadan and the spirituality. Then immediately reminds the listeners that we're there at that time, be careful with the poor, be careful with the orphan, be careful with those who do not possess. If you were to provide iftar to people who do not have, even piece of date, little bit of water or everything else. So don't forget about your responsibilities to the margin of the society, those who have been deprived. So this concept of social consciousness is critically important in our spiritual development. They are not separate from each other. The notion that faith can be only belief and there is no amal, repeatedly in the Quran, has been rejected. Constantly, every time the word aman or iman has been brought in, amal salih comes after it. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. What comes next? وَعَمَلُوا الصَّالِحِ. Repeatedly, this relationship between amal salih, which is nothing more than good deed towards the society outside. So this, unfortunately, the idea that fasting is purely an act of ritual, of abstinence from food and drink and possibly a little bit of prayer, is misinterpretation of the fast. Faith doesn't mean believing in Allah only. Every time faith comes, good deed has to come with it to complement it. And so, on the one hand, faith has two fundamental principles. On the one hand is tangible rituals that clearly identified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us. At the same time, there are core values that we need to be observed. Those rituals, if they are not put or rest on the core values, become meaningless. If you go back to the early history of Islam, when Islam came, how did it approach the society? Every faith that has come, ultimately, the prophets have to deal with the imbalance of the society and ultimately work hard, particularly within the corrupt economic system that allows certain group of people to have as much as possible at the expense of other people, whether the poor, the needy, the destitutes, etc. When it comes to the issue of charity, we have a story in the Holy Quran that clearly reminds us of how we should do. The first khutbah of Jum'ah that I organized here, I talked about Habil and Qabil as a story. What is the story of Habil and Qabil? Sometimes we look at it purely in the context of, well, two sons of Adam, they were asked to make a sacrifice. One sacrifice was accepted, the other sacrifice was not, and the other brother killed the other brother. That's not the issue. Behind every story, there is a lesson to learn. The lesson we can learn from Habil and Qabil is when it comes to giving charity for the sake of Allah, don't search for the scrap to give to Allah in the same way that Qabil did. What happened to them? There was a debate. Who is supposed to become the successor to Prophet Adam? Qabil said, I am the older brother, so I deserve this better than my younger brother. Prophet Adam said, okay, let's deal this and settle it by what we call a sacrifice. Each one of you go and prepare something for presenting it as a sacrifice to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Qabil, the older brother, was a farmer. He went through his farm, scrap of wheat and something, put them together and brought them to the place for sacrifice. Qabil was somebody who a shepherd, looked after camels and animals, went through the entire flock and found the best camel that he could find and brought that camel for the sacrifice. See the approach, the mindset. Yes, we can read the story of Habil and Qabil, but the essence of it is what we give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the time when we are called to test. And Qabil and Habil one brought a scrap of wheat, the other one the best camel. Naturally, the best camel was accepted, and Qabil became jealous. And as a consequence, killed his brother out of jealousy. Unfortunately, that's how we behave in our life. First, we don't understand that there is a relationship between social responsibility and giving for the sake of Allah and charity with fasting. We interpret it in a manner that is purely abstinence from food, drink, and possibly prayer. During the Layal al-Qadr, none of us thought that, look, we really need, it's not just Dua Josh and Kabir, it's not Dua Kumayl, it's not Dua Nudba, it's not Dhikr Astaghfirullah 100 times, it's not the prayer and the Quran. These are, as the British would say, fine. But what about the other part of it? Our Imams talk about the fact that we are supposed to feel the pain of fasting, hunger and thirst, to remember that most of the society, they are less privileged than we are, to see what they are going through. MashaAllah, every one of you is wealthy enough. You go through the day, you know fully well that if the hunger bothers you, at the time of iftar, you can have as much as you want. But what about the poor and the needy within the society that they cannot provide anything? That part is part and parcel of the social responsibility, is part and parcel of the spiritual development. The verse in the Holy Quran, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You are not going to achieve, you shall never attain righteousness unless you spend from what you love. That love sometimes is the thing that you give, sometimes the quantity that you give. And that's when it comes to, for example, supporting organization, charitable organization, mosque centers and everything else. We only drop pittance into the box. You spend 50 cents to drop it into the box, but at the same time you go out of the mosque, you are prepared to spend $50 for knickknacks for the family. Where is the balance? When Quran came at the beginning, when Islam came, establishing an ethical, moral, just society required to deal directly with the economic imbalance within the society. Those tribal leaders that created a unique environmental economic system صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. That economic system that led to the abuse of women, orphans, poor, slaves, and any other form of exploitation of the weak had to be condemned head on. And there are various verses during the Mecca period that deals with this. أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرَ. Competition in accumulating wealth keeps you preoccupied until you die. In Salat al-Jum'ah, there is a verse in the Holy Quran against the Jews. Uses the simile of a donkey carrying all the books on their back. Why? The similarity and metaphor is here. When you hold the book, but you don't practice it, It's like a donkey that carries the best of books on its back but doesn't benefit from it at all. So if the issue of dealing with economic imbalance in the society and the corrupt social structure and economic structure was critical at the beginning of Islam, is critical now as well. We shouldn't think that that responsibility has been removed. Islam strongly attacks selfish, uncharitable, and boastful people that the only thing they care about is their wealth, and they use it to boast and look down at other people. The social responsibility becomes critical. So in another Surah Al-Ma'un, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمَ. What does it tell us? That you could practice the faith, but the faith practice becomes fake. Fake. You pray, but your prayer is fake. You fast, but your fasting is fake. Why? Because you only detached the so-called spiritual dimension from the social responsibility. And Quran calls these people hypocritical, even when they fast, even when they pray. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمَ. Takdeeb means what? You say, you practice in a manner that it is not true. Why? Because if you really cared about your faith, your responsibility to the poor, the orphans, the weak, and those who have been exploited within the society has to be there. When you come to provide something for the charity, you don't search the pocket for some kind of a small change to give it. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. The best. Imagine yourself standing next to Habil and Qabil, and you have been asked to make a sacrifice. By providing a pittance, it's not the sacrifice. Your sacrifice will be similar to Qabil. So we cannot reach that lofty spiritual status if we cannot pay or at least make charitable, generous charitable contribution and to the charities and institutions and the poor in society. Generous giving should be carried out all the time. It's not just when I feel like it, because it's part of the social responsibility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted you wealth. Just reminding everybody, including myself, when we came to this country or any other country, what was our economic status? What did we have? What kind of work we went after to earn a little bit of food to put it on the table? Now that we have become wealthy, we become boastful and we forget about the past. There is a story about Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi had a slave called Ayab. And they say that he had a room separated from everybody else. Late at night, he would go into this room. And he was very loved by Sultan Mahmud to the point that his views and his opinions and advice and consultation with him even was more accepted or respected than the ministers, because he knew that Mahmud is wise. So one night, those people everywhere, wherever you go, the same kind of thing exists. These are backbiters, slanderers, and so on, come in. They saw the close relationship of Sultan Mahmud with Ayaz. They said that let's work if we can remove this person from Sultan Mahmud. They went to him and they said, "O king, do you know why this person late at night goes into this room? He's planning some kind of a revolt against you." So late at night, when this slave or person was in his room, Sultan Mahmud, without making any announcement, came and knocked at the door. I open the door. Sultan Mahmud walks in. He sees the floor is covered by sand. And there is a tattered shirt, ripped and so on, hanging on the wall. And this guy is sitting in front of this shirt, thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I said, what are you doing? He said, when you took me under your wing, that was my clothes, and this was the ground that I lived in, and I slept. Every night I come over here, reminding myself where I started from. So I will not become arrogant and boastful by the wealth that you provided for me. Now start asking yourself in relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have a corner that you go and sit, but instead of talking to Sultan Mahmud, to the Rabb of Sultan Mahmud, the Lord. Remember where we started from, and then where we are now. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us, it says, give me what I have given you, lend it to me, and I will multiply it by 100 times. We become somehow tight-fisted, and we are not prepared to do it. But we are easy in the prayers that we have provided during the month. We are easy to go and ask, have a long list of demand when we wanted to during the month of Ramadan. Even dua iftitah, go and read it. It says, when you want me, I step back. But when I want, I'll come towards you. That's not charity. Charity is to give all the time. The verse at the start of the conversation, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, it gives us that do it and I will multiply. It's his wealth anyway. I will multiply it to you. And gives you the simile of wheat, corn, heirs, and etc., etc. So remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us all the time. There is a story from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullah salam alayhi. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, according to this story, used to give a lot of sadaqah, wealth that he had, distributed between the fuqara. But he had a particular strategy. Every time a poor person came to him and wanted to give him the amount of money that he wanted to give to the poor, he would put it into the hand of the poor, take it back, kiss it, and give it back to him. They said, why, Ya Rasulullah? He said, the moment it touches the hand of the poor, it goes into the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I kiss it out of reverence. Do we really think about our giving to the poor, the needy, the margin within our society, or the charitable organization in the same manner? That what we give, in reality, we are giving it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says that when a poor person, a needy and marginalized individual come to me, I never hesitate to respond. Why? Because that is in itself a blessing that Allah might take it from me and give it to somebody else. Remember, at the end of the day, this wealth is not going to stay with you forever. You are in possession of it until Israel comes. And when it comes, whether you are young, here they are, in front of us, or old, ultimately we have to leave them or go. So becoming charitable is accepting Allah accepts the wealth and rewards you for it. So whatever is left of the month of Ramadan, let's become generous when it comes to giving to charities and helping the poor, and at the same time struggle for the spiritual elevation of our life as well. They go hand in hand. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of you and bless you all, and work with you and support you in whatever is left of the month of Ramadan to achieve something, inshallah. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.